First of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us for the last nutshell of the spring and winter. We're so glad that you're here joining us. I'd like to first thank our sponsors, which are the Hegner Family Foundation and North Central Fair. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring you these discussions for free. So thank you so much to them, and thank you so much to all of you for joining us, because you're part of the reason that we're actually doing these things. And thank you to both Eliza and Dayna for sharing their knowledge with us. And I'd like to turn it over to them. They'll do a little bit of an introduction, and they'll get this rolling tonight. So thanks again.
Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Eliza Greenman, and I am behind a new company called Hog Tree, which is basically feeding pigs off of perennials in a 7-month time frame. But also, my other online entity is Eliza Apples, where it's like my rantings for all things apple related and a lot of other nerdy tree things. But today I'm here with Dayna to talk to you about pigs and talk to you about trees as well. And so just a quick introduction is that in a past life I was a forester, so I have a lot of education in managing forest systems. And then later on in life I became an orchardist, and so I just sort of tweaked the way I viewed tree crops from a timber form into a non-timber form. And ever since then, I've been really interested in incorporating pigs into the scene, because I've loved pigs like my whole life. I have a 23-year-old pig. Her name is Ophelia, and she's still alive, unbelievably so, that I got when I was in 7th grade. So I've been thinking about pigs for a long time. I've been thinking about tree crops for a long time, and so this is sort of the perfect synthesis of what makes me happy. For the last, say, 4 years or so, I've had pigs in apple orchards, and I've been observing that. And then in the last year, I started leasing more of a broadacre site, which went bad ultimately, and that's a whole other talk on land tenure for those who don't own land. But this year I'm I'm leasing 12 acres and potentially more for pigs and for the planting of orchards, and so that's what I'm going to talk about. Historically, I've had American guinea hogs, and I'm no longer having American guinea hogs starting this year. But I sold them in whole and half hog portions, and all this work basically took a half-time person throughout the whole time, throughout my, since I've been doing this. All right.
Cool, and I'm Dayna Burtness. Thanks so much to the Savannah Institute for this series of talks, and thanks to the sponsors. And Eliza has a lot more experience than I do on these things, so thanks for presenting with me, Eliza. You're boosting my credibility.
My pleasure.
So I run Nettle Valley Farm with my husband, Nick. I've been sort of on a long, weird, winding path through agriculture that started when I was 19 with an internship on an organic vegetable farm. I was a wholesale veggie farmer for quite a few years, but then I read the book Restoration Agriculture by Mark Shepard and started to switch over to regenerative ag and more of a focus on livestock and trees, and that was about 5 years ago. So our farm, Nettle Valley Farm, is about 67 acres. It's mostly woods and pasture, and we do have a little open tillable land, but hopefully that will soon be planted chock full of chestnuts, apples, mulberries, that sort of thing. We bought our farm in 2015. We had some FSA assistance, and we started with 3 pigs over that winter on a whim, pretty much. We got a great deal from a friend who's also a pasture pig farmer, Drew French from Fulmore Farm, and we totally just fell in love with pigs. And now we're going to be finishing 40 Kentucky black wattle pigs this year on pasture. And we sell, our business model as of right now is that we sell wholes and halves directly to families just once a year. So we get feeder pigs in the spring, and we sell them off all in the fall. We're going to be butchering them over the course of a month, and that's it. We don't have any livestock over the winter, and that's what works for us right now with our life and infrastructure. Our land was completely just raw land, empty when we bought it. So we don't have any infrastructure, hardly any infrastructure. Like, we don't have a well. We have to bring in all of our own water, and we don't have a permanent place to live on the farm all year round. So that's just what works for us right now. That might change in the future. And for our labor force, I'm the full-time farmer from April through December, and my husband works full-time off the farm, but he's lucky he has a job that he can do remotely. So when the pigs get out, or I need something that have to do something that is a two-person job, I can holler at him or send him a text, and he comes and helps me. So mostly just one person. And I guess the other exciting thing about our farm in the next few years here, we want to develop an incubator farm for other regenerative farmers and grazers. So if you are interested in the driftless area of Minnesota and you are a beginning farmer, just, tuck that away for the future. Cool. So let's dive in. I'll be covering more, pretty much the basics about pastured pigs in the first part of this talk, but we really wanted this to be more of a conversation between two crazy pig ladies and tree nerds, so Eliza's going to be jumping in to give her perspective as well. So I'm guessing if you're on this webinar, you probably know about silvopasture already, but here is a good definition from the Association for Temperate Agroforestry. So silvopasture is the intentional combination of trees, forage plants, and livestock together as an integrated, intensively managed system. So the keywords there are intentional and integrated. So it's not just putting the pigs off in the woods and forgetting about them and moonscaping the landscape. You're managing, in a silvopasture, you're managing your trees, you're managing your forage, and you're managing your pigs together as a glorious symbiotic whole. And I won't read the rest of these benefits, but the gist is that each element of the system really benefits the others. Makes for a more resilient land management system. And while silvopasture is great for all sorts of livestock, Eliza and I both think that pigs especially thrive in silvopasture settings for several reasons. This picture here is my pigs. They're harvesting walnuts in our white pine and walnut plantation. These are black walnuts. So first of all, as many of you know, pigs can't sweat to cool themselves off. So shade is a completely critical part of keeping them cool, along with giving them mud when they need it. I've actually noticed that with my pigs in particular, pretty much when it hits 67 degrees, they make a beeline for the shade, and their heat tolerance is really quite low. They would much rather be cold than hot, in my experience. And actually, this is kind of one of the reasons why I love pigs so much, because they hate heat, and they love naps and eating almost as much as I do. So one of the reasons why we only have pigs is just because I'm a lot like pigs. Second, pigs are omnivores, and they don't have a rumen. They're not ruminous. They need a diverse diet of more than just pasture for them to get all of their nutrition. So they're just a match made in heaven for cleaning up tree crops like apples and chestnuts after the harvest. Also, because of the pig's physiology, they have these short, thick, muscular necks. They have a hard time grooming themselves, especially right behind their ears. So scratching and rubbing posts are critical. Trees are perfect for this. And Eliza, do you want to jump in on this point? Because I think you had something about bark.
Yeah. In an orchard setting, pigs rubbing up against the bottoms of trees is a really great thing, at least I've observed. And that's because they're sanding down the bark. And so in sanding down the bark, you're removing all the hidey holes, essentially, that insects often use to crawl up the tree. And so I've seen, in an apple orchard setting, I've seen wrens be able to pick off like codling moth that's making its way up the tree, and that's just because all the hiding spaces were eliminated by the pigs wanting to scratch. So that's a huge benefit in my mind, considering an organic tool for this is to strap cardboard around the tree in order to see things crawling up and catch them in the cardboard. That's way too much work. Just get pigs.
Just get pigs. Cool. Yeah, and you know, we wouldn't be crazy pig ladies if we didn't spend at least one slide on why we both love pigs so much. As I mentioned, I have a special affinity to pigs because we're kind of similar, so I empathize with them a lot. And I think pigs get a really bad rap for being dirty or disgusting or smelly, really stubborn and naughty. But if you really think about each one of those things, they're just a result of poor human management and animal husbandry. So in my experience, pigs are really intelligent and very sensitive, and they're full of personality. They totally thrive when they're in settings that allow them to express the full range of their pigginess, essentially. On the flip side of that, they endure so much heartbreaking suffering if they're confined in factory CAFO barns, or really, if you think about it, even when they're contained in poorly maintained mud lots where they don't have any things to snout around with their noses. So I guess I would just encourage you, if you're gonna have pigs, put a lot of thought into it from the get-go. Think about what a pig needs from their perspective in terms of novelty, sensory stimulation, socialization. Pigs, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but pigs totally get the zoomies, just like dogs do sometimes, and they need to run around and express joy. Somebody who I really admire and someone who does this really well is Steve. I think it's Dybel. It's either Dybel or Dybel at Golden Bear Farm in Wisconsin. This guy's amazing. He takes his pigs for hikes around his farm, and he even actually plans treasure hunts for them. And you know, you might say like, oh, that's really over the top, but what he's found in his experience is all that effort actually leads to improved herd health and better growth rates. So it's completely backed up in a lot of pig farmers' experience that, yeah, healthy, happy pigs make for tastier pork and make for an easier life for you. So I guess that's just sort of a word on pigs aren't necessarily, they present challenges, and you have to really love pigs to do it well. Eliza, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I often equate pigs to like little kids in a you-pick strawberry operation. Like, it's sort of the same for me. They're sort of the same creature where they're just gorging themselves. They're covered in red. They're so excited. They're just rooting around. And that's sort of how, in my head, I equate pigs, with just like a young child, really excited, moving around in the landscape, harvesting all the great things.
So let's get into some practical elements of a pastured pig setup that can work both in open pastures as well as a silvopasture setting. So obviously the first element we've got is the pig itself. These are some fun images I found on the University of Kentucky website and Pinterest. Pigs have been domesticated for at least 9,000 years. So since they've been domesticated for 9,000 years, they've had a lot of time to work with the genetics and develop a large variety of breeds. So this could be an entire presentation on its own, and it's definitely not one that I'm qualified to give. You know, this is my third year raising pigs, but I did want to pass along some of the best advice that I've gotten when it comes to getting started with pigs. So if you've never managed pigs before, and you think you want to get into the pastured pork business, oftentimes the first question that everybody asks is, what kind of pig should I get? What kind of crazy specific breed should I get for what's the perfect permaculture pig? What's the perfect pastured pig? And the best advice I got was, don't actually get too hung up on breeds at first. So you really just have to figure out what your needs are, what's available to you locally if you're going to buy feeder pigs. So I'd think through, do you and your customers want a lard pig, or do you want a bacon or a meat pig? My customers tend to want more traditional foods, like lots of lard, lots of fatty cuts, but at the end of the day, they still really do want mostly just nicely marbled meat. So that's something to think about when you're choosing a pig breed to work with. Also, you got to think through your timeline for growth. So we, as I mentioned, can't live on our farm over the winter, so we have a very tight timeline from May through November. Our pigs we shoot for 300 pounds in time for their one bad day. And or can you take 2 years to finish a pig? And for us, since we have that tight timeline for growth, that means we really need to work with genetics that grow somewhat quickly on free feed, that don't gorge themselves too much and just put on fat. So we've chosen to work with heritage breed crosses, and that includes Berkshire, Large Black Genetics, Old Spot, Tamworth, Duroc, Mulefoot. This year we're pretty excited to be trying some pigs that actually have Russian boar genetics and also Chinese Meishan genetics. So that's pretty cool. Eliza, I was going to have you chime in here to talk about why you chose guinea hogs and also why you will never have them again.
Right. So I went with American guinea hogs, which are very, very easy to raise. There's so many great things about them. The problem is that they grow very, very slowly when on pasture. And so it takes probably 18 months minimum in order to get the pig up to, say, 200 pounds hanging. And then it's a beautiful hog. It's got beautiful, beautiful meat. But one of the issues is it's a lard hog, and so when you have like a 2-inch fat cap on the hog and you take it to the processor, and somebody's buying your hog based on hanging weight, they're paying a lot of money for fat, and that's not necessarily in our culture right now. In our consumer culture is paying a lot of money for fat, even though fat's where the flavor is. So from a position of time scale, 18 months is too long. My goals are now 7 months, and then just like consumer preference, I have to switch. I have to leave the guinea hog. And also in having them for 18 months, they become, we call them American guinea dogs, because they become your pets in a way, and it becomes way more difficult of separate, like a emotional separation. So yeah, this year I'm going with a heritage cross that's got Tamworth and Large Black in it, but pastured genetics. So all the mothers, it's like 4 generations now that have been on pasture for that charged gut that's ready to process forage. So that's where I'm moving in this year.
Nice. Yeah, and so if you're looking for pigs on pasture, of course you want to stay away from sort of just the conventional pink pigs that are raised in confinement, because they're going to have most of their instincts bred out of them. But if you're lucky enough to find somebody a farmer in the area who has feeder pigs for sale, and they've got a great relationship with their pigs and they obviously care about them and they're healthy, especially if you're just getting started, before you really have to dial in your system too tightly, I would just say, just figure out if you like pigs first. And yeah, so these are some of the things you can think through when you're looking for feeder pigs. One other good piece of advice that I got was to do myself a favor and start with feeder pigs for 3 to 5 years instead of just going whole hog and buying breeding stock right away. I've talked with plenty of farmers who did end up getting breeding stock right away, and they love that, but it really is sort of it's a whole different ball game, and it's a different business model, and it's definitely a different lifestyle. There's more heartache involved just because there's more likely to be deaths and medical emergencies. So to me, it just seems sort of like a next level of pig farming. And of course, everyone feel free to disagree with me on that, but that's just, especially for me, that's a good piece of advice that I got that I would at least throw out there, because feeder pigs aren't that expensive. I mean, a good quality feeder pig can be anywhere from $50 to $150, and when you actually look at how much feed you're giving to the sows over the whole year, what it costs to maintain a boar, all that other stuff, it's definitely worth thinking about. Okay, so we've touched on the breed of pig quickly. Let's look at the other basic elements of a pastured pig setup. So we've got fencing, water, supplemental feed if you choose to go that route, and shelter. So I like this picture of our setup on our farm because it sort of provides a snapshot of all those elements. So with our handy dandy laser pointer here, we've got our waterer, our feeder, our hoopy shade structure in the back, and then, of course, the fencing. So a little brief context for our farm. Here's a bird's eye view of our 67 acres. We, by far, have the weirdest property line in our entire county because it actually follows the topography. Long-term plans include doing a silvopasture by subtraction on the brushy wooded slopes. That's thinning them out, planting more tree crop trees, and then also doing silvopasture by addition by planting tons of chestnuts, mulberries, and apples in those open areas. So I'll zoom in on the portion of the farm we grazed last year. It consists of about a 2.5 acre rented open tillable field, and then our 6 acre walnut and pine plantation. And what we do on our farm is we spend the cooler spring months in those open fields, grazing the pigs. And then in the hottest months, that's when we work through the pines and the walnuts. And the pigs then are helping us manage that plantation by helping us clear the underbrush, because the plantation's about 35 years old, but it really hasn't been managed. So there's going to be a lot of thinning and pruning and management that needs to take place in there. And plus it's a closed canopy right now, so it's a little bit too shaded. And then we do one final pass through the open field, and when it cools down in the fall. And then their final month is spent under the walnuts, where they get just a massive amount of pumpkins and organic apples from our farmer friends, which is great. And we've got a bunch of wild apples on our farm too, so we harvest them and bring them to the pigs. So let's talk about fencing. Here's a sort of a close-up picture of our fencing system. It includes, all the elements of this fencing system. So first we've got our power source. We use a deep cycle battery that we swap out and charge pretty much every couple of weeks, but they've lasted for up to a month if they're a good battery. Then there's the energizer. And we use a Parmax Magnum 12. I think we just found it on Amazon. I try to buy stuff from our local farm store as much as possible, but sometimes for this more specialized grazing equipment, you got to go online. And then that connects to both the ground rod right here, which is this great design from Premier One. It's just a 3-foot T-shaped ground rod, and it's really easy to pound in and move. And then you've got the fence itself, which we use pig netting from Premier One, which we sort of have a love-hate relationship with. We can talk about that a little bit more. This actually happens to be their electric fencing training pen. And this is where we let them learn that the netting is not to be touched. They will get a solid, 9,000 volt zap on the nose if they touch this. So then, as you can see, we use this system out in the open field in the spring and in the fall. But we also use it in the pine and nut plantation, where it's definitely more of a pain in the ass because it can get tangled, but it still works and works well. We last year only had pigs get out once, and that was because one of the pieces of fence that I accidentally used one of the ones that was broken, and they figured out and busted through the fence. We also can use the netting and do use the netting in our brushy woods. We clear fence lines with our handy-dandy scythe, Austrian scythe, or a weed whip with a brush blade on it. Another tip for handling the netting is this cool contraption that we got from, that Jordan Green, thanks for sharing your pictures, Jordan, from J&L Green Farm. It's his nifty way of keeping the fencing all organized and untangled when moving it around the farm. So he can just scoop that whole thing up with the forks on his tractor. Of course, netting is not your only option. There are plenty of folks who keep their pigs contained with either a single, double, or triple wire or strand of either polywire or actually high tensile wire. On the left, we've got another picture from Jordan, and these are his pigs respecting a single strand of polywire. And the picture on the right is a picture from the Spinocchia farm in Italy. I worked for a couple weeks there this winter, and they are rotating their Chintasinese pigs through their olive groves, actually using a double strand of high tensile wire. And talk about pain in the ass. That was really kind of a pain in the ass to move, but it's the only thing in their area that stands up to the chingale, or the wild boar that are in their area. So if you're in a part of the world that has feral hogs or wild boar, you might want to consider that, because they will absolutely mangle netting and polywire. And Eliza, these next two pictures are yours. Do you want to talk about them?
Yeah. So this is a complete overkill picture of 4 strands, but the reason why I did it this way was because this orchard where I had these pigs in, the owners had show dogs that didn't really take a liking to pigs all that much. So the top 2 strands of wire are as much to deter dogs as, and because there's no, I mean, this is like a 15-pound pig. These are piglets. There's no way they were going to hop that. And so, yeah, and that's something to remind everybody about is, you know, oftentimes fencing is exclusionary, just like what Dayna said with the wild boar fencing, you know, and using high tensile. For me as well, it's, you know, it's maybe an extra 10 minutes to put up an extra line up high. Ideally, though, in this situation, I would use just two lines, and the lowest, when you have pigs this small, the lowest line on these poly poles you see, which I get from the local feed store, and I actually really like. That lowest line isn't low enough for a really small pig. If you have a farrowing operation or you just get American guinea hogs at 8 weeks old, that's what they look like at this age. And so you'd have to wrap the line around the pole at a level that works. And so keeping the grass down is really important with that. And the next, yeah, and so here's the 2-line system that I pretty much stick with. Once they get older and bigger, I switch to 1 line, but here you can see the poly pole again. And these are the 2 lowest settings, and that just works really well for me.
And Eliza, do they get out?
They get out when I haven't moved them fast enough. That's pretty much, they're all, you know, all the pigs I work with are highly trained to electric fence, and the ones who are showing defiance are the ones to get slaughtered first.
Yep.
You know, as a roaster, or usually just as a roaster hog. But having a pig that teaches everybody else how to get out, which happens, needs to be dealt with swiftly and quickly, or else this fencing system doesn't work.
Right. And I just realized that some of you may be wondering why I use the pain in the ass netting, which is way harder to use and gets tangled on everything. For my context, we use it because it's more visible to both the pigs and the humans. And meaning that when it's time to shift into a new paddock, my pigs move right away because they can clearly see that the netting is no longer there. Whereas sometimes I've heard that with other farms, when they use a single strand of polywire or 2, sometimes it takes longer for the pigs to figure out that it's actually gone. Eliza, I don't know if you've run into that at all. Do your pigs just know when the polywire is gone?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
They're really excited to move on.
Nice. And then also for humans, we farm in a really visible area by a very busy road. So I don't want to get calls saying that I've got pigs loose in a field because they can't see the fence. And then also folks in my area are really concerned about feral pigs. And so I think, at least for us right now, when they're near the road and people can see them, netting is more reassuring to me and my neighbors. And of course, it doesn't help, but also I tried using polywire at the very beginning because it's so much easier to use. And I trained my pigs to it for a week, and everything was going fine until I put them out on the first paddock, and they just jumped right through it. I don't know what happened to this day, but it sort of scarred me for now. So I'm going to stick with netting for now, but I think my overall goal will be to get to a system more like what Eliza uses. So we got some overall tips for success when it comes to mobile electric fencing for pigs. So you're going to want to train the pigs, as we mentioned, to the netting or the polywire when they're contained in hard fencing like hog panels. Their tendency is to go forward sometimes when they get a zap. So if they can see the hard fencing in front of them, that training period associates backing up and that zap in their minds. To be on the safe side, I usually shoot for at least 3 days or even up to a week. Another crucial aspect, these fences are not physical barriers. They're really just suggestions. They're psychological barriers. A great way to make sure that the pigs stay where you want them to stay is just make sure that they have what they need inside the fence, and then they're much less likely to run off. If they've got enough water, feed, mud, shelter, buddies, entertainment, they'll be way less likely to run off. Also, 2 is 1, 1 is none. We've all heard that phrase before. Definitely have backups of each part of your fence. You don't want to have to run to the farm store in the middle of the day if your Energizer craps out on you. That happened to me. And you've got these little velociraptor pigs that are constantly testing the fence. You don't want to get back and have your pigs running all over the road. Same goes for your ground rod, your wiring, your battery. I'd also recommend having at least 3 paddocks worth of fencing on hand so you can set up more paddocks at a time when you have the right weather, time, energy, that sort of thing. And then also, speaking of Energizers, buy one with the most joules you can possibly afford. And the common wisdom, at least in the pastured pig forum on Facebook, seems like you want at least 2.5 joules for your Energizer. So you've got volts and joules. The volts deliver the bite of the electric fence. So it's also important to make sure that you're testing it regularly. I try to keep mine at least 6,000 volts. But the joule rating is about, as Walt Jeffries explains it, he basically says the joule rating is about the potential for work that the Energizer can do, which is burning through weeds, not burning through weeds, but zapping through weeds rather than ouch. And so especially when you have netting in brushy or grassy areas, you want to have at least 2.5 joules. We use one with 3 joules.
Yeah, and I use one with 6.
Yep. And Eliza, do you have any other tips for success on fencing?
And just the clearing of the ground. If you have access to, I've used everything from this exact brush mower in the picture. I do highly recommend getting one with a harness because that allows you to go for a lot longer and you're not, and it's more ergonomically correct. But I've used a lawnmower to cut lines before I put paddocks in. I've used a bush hog. Obviously, a bush hog is the easiest way if you have access to a tractor, but it's all, and I've used a scythe. And so, you know, it's all what you have and all where your ethics are. But for me, the quicker, the better in terms of laying out paddocks and keeping that grass down. So that does take mowing for me.
For sure. When we're in the open fields, we use a brush hog on the back of our tractor, and then in the brushy areas, we use either the scythe or the weed whip, or we use loppers and just clip brushes or the brushy vines back. Oh, one other thing: invest in a good fence tester. Oftentimes, you'll see the cheap little 5 LED light fence testers that are like $10. Just take my word from it. Don't use that. It's so crappy. It's really hard to read, even on an overcast day. Just spend the $45 and get a digital tester, and that just gives you the readout right away. It'll just it'll encourage you to test the voltage on your fence more often. Cool. So let's move on to watering. So drinking water it's huge. It's a limiting factor for pig growth. If they run out of water, they're not going to eat, and that's going to cause all sorts of stress and slower growth and health problems. And so here's the system that we started with: just simply a 55-gallon drum with the top cut off, and then you can see down here at the bottom we got a nipple drinker on each side, and then we've got it connected to a T-post. And then I adjusted the height by setting it on these concrete blocks. And we would load up this 55-gallon drum with water at our neighbor's place, and then just come and gravity feed it into our tanks. And this worked okay. It was a huge pain in the butt to move and took a long time and was really not great if we want to be moving our pigs every 2 to 4 days, which is what we shoot for, because you'd have to pull the T-posts and then repound the T-posts and lug these poopy, stinky blocks all over the place. Also for us, like I said, we don't have water on our farm, so we'd have to dump this out each time, and that just ended up being a huge waste of water when you have to haul every single gallon. So then we upgraded to these Brower waters, and they work pretty well. They're 85 gallons each, and we created this sort of mobile pig unit barn with the 2-horse little trailer that you see there on the right. So we had a 275-gallon tank, and we stored our extra fencing in there, and so we'd haul that over to our neighbors, fill it up with water, haul it back, gravity feed into our tanks. The problem with these Brower waters is that they leak if you're not on pretty dang level ground, and pretty much none of our ground on our farm is level, so I'd find myself having to prop up sides of the pallets to make sure that they stayed level. Overall, not great for our system. Also, since we've got pastured pigs, every time the pigs root around, they get their noses all dirty, and then when they stick their noses in there to drink, they deposit a whole bunch of mud and feed into the bottom of that water tank, and it goes anaerobic and gets gross. So I found myself wasting a lot of water by having to clean out the bottoms of that. So this year, we are going to upgrade to this system. So thanks to Toby McPartland from the Pastured Pig Forum, this is actually his picture. We're going to be putting a bunch of nipple drinkers on each side of a 275-gallon IBC tote, and that way we can just pick it up with forks, move it wherever we need to, have the nipples at various heights, so the pigs can always have access to water what they need. The only thing with nipple drinkers is that pigs are smart, and they can figure out how to hold down the nipple drinker, hold open the nipple drinker, and drain the water tank to make a wallow. So the only addition that we're going to make to this system is to add cattle panels underneath that prevents them from digging giant wallows right at the base of feeders. So you can see back in this system, we already started doing that down here. So we just put simply a cattle panel. So that lets them walk up and drink, and it can even handle some mud at the base. So that's what we are going to use at this point. Of course, those aren't your only options. Cliff Davis from Pig and Leaf Farm, also known as Spiral Ridge Permaculture, he sent me these nice simple troughs that he used for water and feed. Thanks, Cliff. Cliff is one of those pig farmers who's really innovative, and you should definitely follow Pig and Leaf on Facebook. He posts lots of great pictures and videos almost every day. Here are some other examples of waters that keep the water nice and clean. So Jacob Van Bendigon, I hope I'm saying your name right. He had this great system where he runs 2 strands of electric. This keeps the pigs out of the trough and keeps them from just using this as a wallow and a swimming pool. And then on the right here, we've got a system that Kristen Epps uses. Thanks, Kristen. I believe the instructions for how to make a water like this that you can drag around are on Farm Hack. So that's also a great way to do things. Eliza, did you want to make a comment about the trough?
I'm just a little terrified of these pigs on the left here getting electrocuted, because I've had pigs that size get into a trough. I wouldn't want to test it.
Yeah.
But, this is working for them, so it's just my own fear speaking.
Totally. And one of the great things about social media these days is you can rig up your own system and then ask for constructive feedback, and you'll get, dozens of responses within an hour. So there's lots of folks out there who will help you think through these systems. And then here are 2 more. One from Mark Hayes on the left. He's got sort of the Darby Simpson style piggy drinking deck here, which I really like, which again prevents them from draining the water and creating a big wallow. And then Jennifer Myers' system on the right here, I like that. It's on skids. You can just pull the whole thing. And then here's this just awesome next level piggy waterer from Ben Falloon at, I think it's Taranaki Farm. I hope I'm saying that right. So what Ben says is, I purchased a small cast iron snout operated drinker that I then cast in concrete so they can't be moved around. I then attached them to either a gravity supplied underground water line from one of my dams, or simply park a 55-gallon drum with a float valve just outside the pig enclosure with a short 1-inch hose attached to the drinker. And he says that pretty much the only maintenance is he has to flush the bowl once a week. Otherwise, it's a pretty clean way of watering pigs. So I love that. And when we went over these slides, Eliza, you had a really great comment about how this would integrate in with orchard watering systems.
Yeah, I've sort of thought about this. If you are planting an orchard and you're setting up an irrigation line, this would be a really cool way to be able to move this from paddock to paddock and fill up and quickly fill up, or at least plug into during certain times. So I'm still in the drawing boards of all this, but I really love this system right here.
And one of my goals for all of our pastured pig infrastructure is that for moves, everything except the fence, I want to make so I don't have to actually get off the tractor to move it. So that's why I like everything to be on pallets if possible, so I can just lift it up and move it to the next paddock. Because if you're doing this every 2 to 4 days, I mean, that over the course of a season, that adds up to a lot of moves. So you want to, make it pleasant to move and make it easy on yourself, because all of those little annoyances really add up. So I guess that brings us to some tips for success. It's pretty simple. Just figure out how to keep your water clean and fresh. Limit, not necessarily limit wallowing, but consider how to control wallowing right around your waters, and consider how to control disturbance right around your waters. And also something that I didn't put on here, definitely consider the quality of your water. On our farm, we have 4 different ponds that we can draw from, but 3 of them are filled with ag runoff. And so I'm not necessarily convinced that makes for great pig drinking water. So that's another thing to think through. And then we'll go through supplemental feeding systems pretty quick here. In theory, you don't, this is a hot topic of conversation among pig farmers, but in theory, you don't have to feed pigs any supplemental feed as long as you've got, as long as you're meeting their nutritional needs through your pasture and your tree crops and any waste stream you've tapped into. But it is important to remember that they're not omnivores. They do need, for instance, lysine is a limiting factor in their growth. So for us, we have decided to do a supplemental feeding program, because we really do want them to get them up to 300 pounds in our tight timeline. And here's what we've decided to use. We use these big Osborne wheel feeders, and they've got metal, the sweep on the bottom that the pigs nudge with their noses, and it agitates the feed and causes more to come down. It's great because the feed can get wet and it has no way of wicking up into the feed storage. They are pretty expensive. They're over $1,000 each new, but our feed is so expensive. I think we spend anywhere between 35 cents and 45 cents a pound on our feed, because we have sprung for the certified organic, corn-free, soy-free, fish meal-free feed. So it's mostly organic peas and organic barley, and some organic flax. So by my calculation, these feeders will pay for themselves right quick if we're feeding out literally tons of feed each season. And long term, of course, the goal is to bring that number down quite a bit through tree crops and improving the quality of our pastures. And this is how we move those big feeders with our 50 horsepower tractor. It works pretty well. And of course, you don't have to start with that. Certainly, if you have just a few pigs you're working with, you can do something simple like this, a trough. Just cut a 55-gallon drum in half and reinforce it with some lumber. You can also feed directly on the ground. And Eliza, do you want to talk about that a little bit, about what you do?
Yeah. If the paddock is worn down, essentially, because most of what my pigs eat is grass and other fodder and forage. So if I am supplementing, say, with apples or grape pomace or something from off-site, I often throw down flakes of hay first and then feed them on top of that, just to add a barrier, especially if the paddock is looking more bare and I haven't moved them just yet.
Yep, and with troughs and feeding on the ground, you just have to make sure that each pig has enough shoulder space so they're not fighting over food. That's pretty important too. Here's a simple trough feeder that the folks at Terra Perezza Farm in Texas use. They have a great relationship with their partner restaurant and get all sorts of pre-consumer food waste, and they feed it out in this. They just pull that from paddock to paddock. And then, again, this is Steve at Golden Bear Farm. He uses these slightly smaller wheel feeders for his supplemental feed. And my friends at Turkey River Farm in Iowa use these stainless steel hog feeders that are sort of repurposed from a more conventional setting, and that can work too as long as you put a piece of plywood over. So yeah, the tips for success would just be, this is a huge topic. We could spend an entire webinar on this, but think through whether or not you're going to do free feeding or ration feeding. Also, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record when it comes to this, but make it very pleasant to move. Think through all those little annoyances for moving, because you don't want anything to be keeping you from moving your pigs as frequently as they need to be moved. Consider the performance of the feeder in all the weather conditions like rain and snow and wind, and yeah, just figure out how to minimize waste, because oftentimes your feed is going to be upwards of a third of the cost of feeding your pig, raising your pig. And then last infrastructure piece, here's what we use for shade and shelter on our farm when they're on open pasture. This is just a simple hoopie that is made from cattle panels. And that was big enough for about 10 big market hogs and then big enough for 25 small pigs. So this year when we raise 40 pigs, we're going to have to build several more. Here, these are called porta huts. They're just commercially available. You can oftentimes find them for free or cheap in fence rows, because a lot of old timers in the area who've gotten out of pasture pig farming usually have them sitting around, and sometimes they're not in great condition, but they definitely work. And my friend Marcellino from Italy, this is kind of a neat thing he developed. He took all of his olives. Well, so first he laid down a cattle panel, and then he put all of his olive pruning branches on top of that and laid down another cattle panel, and then wired the cattle panels together. So he has this modular system that is pretty sweet and sort of camouflaged, and then he makes pig huts out of them by just wiring them together, then with a few pieces of metal on the top. So I thought that was pretty neat.
I want to say something about that last one real quick.
Yeah.
So I think this is brilliant, and one of the cool things that comes to mind when I see this is, so in Central Asia they have their natural forest type, and like Kyrgyzstan is walnut apple, and so there's a big symbiosis there with their livestock grazing in these walnut apple forests. And one of the things that walnut does is deter insects. Juglone as a vapor or whatever, as a smell, is less appetizing to bugs, and so that's what keeps a lot of their apples rather blemish-free. So in looking at this, it seems to me like you could totally play around with trapping walnut cuttings in there, or other, as much as like a companion plant would work with in your garden. I feel like this could be something really cool in terms of, even though you might be doing a little bit more work more often and changing them out because they need to be potent, this could be an insect pusher awayer.
Nice. I like that. That's cool. Then this is a picture from my friends at Turkey River Farm again, and they use these calf huts. Those oftentimes you can find at auctions or for sale as well. That seems to work pretty well. And here is another picture from Cliff. This is just a simple A-frame that he uses in the woods at his farm. So thanks, Cliff, for sharing that picture. It looks like it works well. And then These two pictures are both, again, from Jordan Green again. So shelter doesn't have to be fancy. The important thing is they can be cold and they can be wet, but they really just can't be cold and wet. So that's the main thing when it comes to shelter. So we have covered the basics of mobile pig infrastructure. So let's talk I'm going to talk just a little bit about the pasture part of the Silvopasture trio. And this will mostly apply to those of you who are converting a row crop field into pig pasture, but you can also use these techniques to add more nutrient-dense annuals over time. So I'm actually a really big fan of annual pastures for pigs. So what we do is, in the spring, broadcast with the spreader behind the UTV or just by hand. I saw a question about bare patches after pigs come through, and yeah, there's always going to be bare patches. And yeah, we do go through and seed again. We do a huge variety of seeds, and my sort of philosophy on that is nature knows better than I do, and the pigs know better than I do. So my goal is to just provide as many different kinds of things for them to eat, and I just throw the seed out there, and I figure when the conditions are right, it's gonna sprout and it's gonna grow, and the pigs will be able to harvest what they need. And it works pretty well. We've broadcast barley, field peas, oats, rye, wheat, tillage radish, purple top turnips, grazing greens, aka dwarf Essex rape, sunflowers, any sort of leftover vegetable seeds or herb seeds that I have, pumpkins, you name it. And then we just let it grow and let it go to seed as much as possible. Because really what I want to do is to stack the seed bank. We basically try to think like a weed, obviously, because we love weeds. We take a lot of lessons from weeds. We named our farm Nettle Valley Farm because we love quote unquote weeds so much. We're basically just trying to fill that quote unquote weed seed bank with actually desirable plants. And then we let them hog it down and trample it. And inevitably they'll miss some of that seed, and they're going to be pooping out some undigested seeds. So our goal is to get enough green growth then for a second grazing in the fall, or at least enough to keep the soil covered through the winter. And over time, obviously, grasses and other perennials will come in, but this is our way of sort of slowly transitioning over, and hopefully we'll end up getting a nice balance of perennials and annuals. And one downside, I am not proud of this picture. One downside of annual pasture is that it can just liquefy in a matter of hours. This happened on the right there. I'm pretty sure it happened in less than 2 days. We just got a deluge of rain, like several inches, like we do in Minnesota, and it just liquefied. The nice thing is we just spread a bunch more seed, and it all is lush and green. It was all lush and green by the end of the season. And you don't only just have to do this in open pastures. This is a picture from Jordan again. He seeds rye and barley for his pigs in his wooded paddocks. And so that can come up and provide some more calories in the forage layer for those of you who have enough sunlight that reaches the ground. And then also I wanted to show this picture because one strategy that we're doing, as I mentioned, is the sort of silvopasture by subtraction, and we're working with, the pigs are helping us clear out the brushy underlayer so we can get to planting more tree crops. And this is just sort of a fun before and after picture. So this is before, well, as the pigs went in, and then after the pigs went in. So they really do utilize and trample a lot of that brushy undergrowth. They loved raspberries, the raspberry leaves. So that's another strategy that we're doing. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Eliza.
All right, so just to conclude the forage layer, I wanted to put in this slide, but also use it to talk about a picture I don't have, and I apologize for. So this right here, what you're seeing is oats within the alleyways of a brand new apple planting. And so this right here is you can see the electric fence on the perimeters here. It's lower down because this was actually used for another animal. This wasn't used for pigs, but it was a forage. And if you translate this into an orchard setting, I'm pretty excited about using forage for multiple purposes. So in an orchard, you can seed oats. Say you seed oats in like mid-June, mid to late June. Those oats are going to come up and be ripe around early mid-September. And so for me, I really like to have oats flop over and then become bedding for the harvest of the fruit trees, because I don't pick, I pick up from the ground. And so it's sort of an old-timer method of growing a cover crop underneath the trees, letting it fall down, and then that's providing cushioning so that you have higher quality, less bruised fruit when harvesting from the ground, because it's much faster. And I harvest from the ground because my markets are often alcohol markets, hard cider and whatnot, and so they can take a few dings here and there. But then the key is, the fun part about that is running the pigs through afterwards. When you have a bunch of oats that have flopped down underneath the trees, unlike on this picture where you see it in the alleyways, if you have it underneath the trees, the pigs are going crazy. They're eating the seed heads, they're pooping everywhere, they're peeing everywhere, they're cleaning up your apple harvest, and that I've found is sort of it almost acts like a composting in place, which I really like. It seems to benefit the soil life, but also it's helping to decompose fungal leaves that might have dropped containing fungal spores and other things. So one of my main gists of all of this, and one of the main reasons I use pigs, is in order to grow fruit using lower input strategies. So that means for me less sprays. I'm not a fan of conventional sprays. I'm not a fan of many organic sprays. And so in sort of creating a relationship between pigs and the orchards, or animals and the orchards, in order to get a lot of work done without, say, having interns or hired help. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Dayna. Okay, so this is a rundown. This is an interest. When I was making this presentation, I've got a new piece of land that I'm leasing, and so I thought it would be helpful for me to just present on my methodology of what I'm doing and how I'm going to build this site. And this is my own methodology that I've extracted from different pieces across like the pig world and the science world and who knows what other worlds. And so, it's an ever-changing system. All of this is observation-based for the most part, and science-based for the second part. And so, it's just, for me, this is just a ballpark of what I'm basing things on, and then they're going to be tweaked as we move on. All right, so go ahead and slide, I guess. So for a hog orchard, my goals are, and I left off one of my main goals, which is my goals are to have also like another market for the fruit other than just pigs. So the pigs get some, and then there's a market that's demanding others. And so I forgot to put that on this slide. I apologize. But other than that, on the pig layer, I really want excited and happy pigs. And what that means is I want these pigs to get so stoked about moving to another paddock. And just because I feel like when they're really excited and they're moving to another paddock, they eat so much more. And I want to encourage them through happiness and through excitement to just be absolute gluttons, more so than, I feel like that's at least for me, like when I'm super happy, I like to eat more food. And also when I'm sad, I guess I like to eat more food, but we're not going to talk about that. So, excited and happy pigs, and then another one of my goals is eventually, and I do not think I can do this off the bat, but feeding 100% from on-site, which will consist of trees dropping fodder, so fruits and nuts, combined with leaf forage or leaf fodder as well, and pasture crops. And then my third goal here is easy rotation. This is about man hours. It's about, okay, well, I need to hire somebody, and so I need to make these systems as efficient as possible, and so I'm paying less money in order for these pigs to be managed. And then, of course, the fourth goal is flavor. First and foremost, I'm an orchardist. I grow fruits, I grow nuts. Silvopasture, to me, my own personal definition of silvopasture is animals in orchards. And so I want these pigs to become the essence of my orchards. You know, I want them to be the whole game. They are my passion. They're just the culmination of everything that I find good in this world, because that's sort of how I view an orchard. All right, so we're going to move on. This next slide. Okay, so this is the real deal. All right, so this is a 7.5 acre piece of property. That's one of a few. There's some others surrounding this that are part of a lease that I'm taking on this year. And so I'm going to walk through how I basically plan on developing this through the years. And so for the first off, go ahead, Dayna, and well, no, don't switch slides yet. Go back. All right. So if you're like me and you want to plant orchards, there's a real barrier to planting orchards or to being a perennial tree person in general. Is you've got to have time on your side, and so it's going to take between 5 and 10 years to get a fruit crop. And so what that means is it's going to be really hard for you to get a bank loan, because trust me, I've done it, of standing there and they're like, well, what's your income in the time being, you know, in this first 5 years? And you just have to be like, off-site, supplementary income, I don't know. But now I really think the answer for most farmers is going to be in annuals. So either you're developing some sort of crop in between the tree rows, so that's an annual crop, or you're raising an animal of some sort that is another view of an annual crop. And so for me, with my old background in pigs and my love for trees, I'm just putting those two together. And that's part of the reason why I'm choosing to have to raise pigs in around 7 months. Is because that's my annual crop. That's my window for, once these start producing, that's going to be my window for dropping fruits and nuts. And so those are just my goals. So in looking at this 7.5 acre example, the first layer, the only resource I have, if you see this, like there are no trees on this. This is just pasture. And so the resource I have available right now is grass. And so what I'm basing my year 1 on and year 2 on essentially is paddock size for, it's basically planning my orchard paddock sizes based on the resources I have right now. All right, so we'll go, so what I'm talking about, and there was a question about this earlier about square foot per pig per day. And that's exactly what I'm heading into right now is when just utilizing the grass layer, go ahead, Dayna, and go to the next slide. When just using the grass layer, Walter Jeffries, who you've heard multiple times throughout this talk, estimates that it's 0.23 square feet per pound per pig per day on his sites, with his soils, in his climate, with his you know, what he has seeded and such. Walter Jeffries has been at this game a very long time. He's one of the, he might be the most experienced pastured pig farmer in the United States, if not the world. And so this, to me, is too ambitious for somebody starting out, or even, you know, I'm not starting out, but I'm still new to this game, theoretically speaking. And so for me, I needed to go with something a little bit less ambitious. So I chose around 5 times more space per pig per pound per day. And so my number, and I'm going to bear with me here because we're going to talk some numbers in a minute, but my conservative estimate is 1.2 square feet per pound per pig per day. All right, go ahead. All right, so I made this Excel spreadsheet, which is just ballpark, because with pig gains, it is more exponential throughout the season. But in thinking about an orchard layer and thinking about I need to have a certain amount of space in order to plant this orchard to deal with my goals, I came up with this spreadsheet, which I would be willing to share with anybody because it would just save you 25 minutes or however long it would take you. But basically, you have your days on the left-hand column, and then the average rate of gain for a pig on pasture is with a little bit of supplement, which is what I'm like weigh, is 0.76 pounds per day. All right, so this second column is just the number plus 0.76 as we go on to the days. And then we have our square feet, 1.2 that's set. And so the last column is the daily requirements, square foot requirements of each pig. So basically I took this spreadsheet and my days go day 1 through day 222, which is pretty much the max amount of time I want to keep a pig is 222 days. And so then there's 31 days in May, there's 30 days in June, and I just started cutting those out and adding up the square foot totals per pig within a month. So go ahead, Dayna. All right, and so that's where this slide is. As you see, this is the square foot necessities per pig per month. All right, so in May it's close to 2,000 square feet for that whole month. June, close to 3,000 square feet, and that's per pig. And so I basically added all of this up and just figured out how many pigs I could have on my 7.5 acres, which ended up being 10. Okay, go ahead and keep moving. All right, and so this is just a slide showing the requirements for 10 pigs. So I decided I was going to have 10 pigs because I figured that's what my pasture layer at this point could support within a 222-day period. So what you see here, May through November, and these numbers, 20,000 square feet, November 73,000 square feet, that then was translated into my paddock size per month, or basically not my paddock size, but my monthly paddock size per month. And so that's how, once you have your paddock size, it's like having your orchard size. You can work backwards from there, because then you can determine what trees you want to plant, what bushes you want to plant, what kind of trees, all of that, given they all have specific spacings, and I'll get into that in just a minute. They all have specific spacings, and so you can start to play with that. You can start to play in the square foot game in order to pack this paddock as full of trees as you want, or fruit or whatever, and allowing for sunlight. You can play that game. All right, so go ahead, Dayna. So this is what my month of May looks like. Just to show you, this is I just used Google Earth, and I have in this paddock, it's just a visual for you to see, but also for me to see. I'm planning on moving these pigs often, as much as daily if I get a lot of rain, because I have this soil type is a heavier, it's on the silt clay loam side, so it's heavier. So when I get a lot of rain, I got to move them fast. And this to me is very doable in moving. It's if I were to move them every day, I would be moving them essentially 18 feet along this line, and that would give me the same. That would give me my daily paddock needs. But also, when viewing this for May, I have 20,000 square feet to plant trees, and so what my what to me, I'm like, what is dropping in May? What food sources, what tree food sources are available in May? Because I can have lots of pasture sources that are available, but that's not really my goal. I'm a tree person. I don't like bending over. I don't like dealing with grass, and I actually don't know a whole lot about grass. I have dairy friends who are helping me manage my pasture layer. For me, what's dropping in May and what's available in May are mulberries and mulberry leaves. And so I'm going to be planting a system of mulberry trees that will be dropping mulberries, but also some pollarded mulberries for leaf hay, which I'll talk about in a moment. But go ahead to the next slide, Dayna. And this is a quick little look at what this site would look like to raise 10 pigs throughout a 7-month period. And these are the paddock sizes to scale. And like I said, you know, there could be issues with this. I might see like come August that I need a much bigger place or a much bigger site for these pigs. They're gaining too fast, or they're not eating enough, whichever. And so, you know, this is something to play with, but at least what I'm really interested in my tree layer, so May and June for me are largely mulberries. And then I'm interested in coming up with the most diverse tree system I can in order to feed these pigs throughout the rest of the month. And what that is that involves a lot of deep horticultural nerdiness, which I contain. Basically, for example, I'm going to talk about apples for a minute. There are 17,000 varieties of apples. It's not just the 8 you see in a grocery store. And these apples ripen anywhere from June through, say, December. You know, and so within those 17,000, I've basically been on a quest in the apple world to identify apples that ripen with pretty exact ripening dates between that time frame. Because if you can get an apple that's ripening in late June, and then in July, and then, you know, first week of July, and second week of July, and third week of July, and so on, and you plant it out with that in mind. So that is, one, going back to my goal, that's creating a really excited pig, because that's a different flavor every week or every day, depending on how intensive you can get this. Okay, so it's a different flavor. It would be like me getting an apple CSA where you get a different heirloom apple a day, and you're just like so looking forward to the next flavors and the next texture and the next taste. I totally believe pigs contain this ability and like love for food. They're Epicureans, I believe. All right, so that's a happy and excited pig, but also this is ease of rotation. If you've got things ripening on a time scale, then you can determine when your pigs are moving through that. So your paddocks become essentially your ripening scheme becomes your paddocks, and so you can determine this. And then, of course, that all leads into flavor. This is the essence. This is the essence of all of this. Of what I'm going for. Lots of different apple varieties, and then other fruit varieties. So go ahead, Dayna. We might have to skip. Oh yeah. So this is a quick slide on just quick spacings. So this is how you would, you know, an M111 apple tree. So that's a large semi-dwarf apple, which is probably most widely sold in tree nurseries, like through maybe like your local ag store or whatever, or 20 by 20 foot spacing, so that's 400 square feet. So, you know, you would go through and you would just see, all right, I've got a 20,000 square foot paddock, how many M111 apples could I have? Or play around. This is the design scheme of playing. So with, you know, M7 apples is 300 square feet per tree. Mulberries, 900 square feet, but then if you decide to pollard the mulberries, which I'll talk about in just a moment, that spacing becomes way smaller because it's all about canopy. So you're cutting on a yearly or every other year or every third year basis, and so you can fit them a lot closer to those trees that are not being cut, and so on and so forth. Go ahead, Dayna. All right, and this is a real life example of what I've put together, at least for the month of July and into August. On this slide is just my apple drop scheme. And I possess this for a few mulberry varieties that take care of May and June and into July. And then there are chinkapins and chestnuts and persimmons and some other fruits that I have made data for that will go into my paddocks, just to have this high diversity of fruits that these pigs are moving with. But as you can see, like July 1st through 8th, you know, it's got like 7 or so apple varieties ripening on that day. And then July 9th, it goes to like 14. And so if you wanted to plan weekly paddocks, these are the apple varieties that would be contained within that. So like I said, this is really nerdy, but this is how I see us best feeding pigs off of tree crops, is by really planning it and timing it. All right, go ahead. All right, so I talked about, I hinted at pollarding a little bit, and I wanted to give you, and then I hinted at orchard trees, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a hybrid, and that is top working. And so top working is either you plant a cheap rootstock, like you go to the Department of Conservation in Missouri and you order a 15-cent bur oak tree or a 15-cent red mulberry tree or whatever, and you plant it out. Or you have some like invasive Bradford pear or seedling bur oak or, you know, some other like squirrel planted tree in your area, and you want to make use of it. So you can employ it. So either you can plant these rootstocks, and by the way, this is how I recommend this. I recommend if you're going to do an orchard of some sort, if you're trying to go about this, this is a high input and this is a high investment situation. But in order to make it a lower investment, lower investment and lower risk, you start with rootstocks, you grow them, you have them get established, because rootstocks will, even like trademark rootstocks will cost you maybe $2 a tree. And so you start with that. You get them above the deer browse line. If you don't have fencing, you might tree tube them, but you're going to give them above the point where they can be harmed. And then you graft them via top working, this method. You graft them above deer browse. And so all of a sudden, it might take you another extra year or another 2 years to get fruit off of that tree, but you're saving, it could be upwards of $20 to $25 a tree in your initial investment. So you're spreading out that investment. But top working essentially is, the way I use it most oftenly is changing a tree over from one type to another. So the example I have here is, you have a awful Red Delicious apple tree, and you're like, oh, I wish I never planted this Red Delicious apple tree from Home Depot. Well, never fear, you can just lop off the top of it, and you can graft whatever apple variety that makes you feel happy, and then that's what you have. And that works for Bradford pear, it works for bur oaks, it works for pecans, walnuts, persimmons, hawthorn, it works for a whole lot of species, whole lot of genus. Doesn't really work for wild cherry, so don't try that. It's probably going to fail. But it's a way that you can start to re-sculpt your landscape without having to plant any trees, or you're planting trees on the cheap. So in this picture, I have some volunteers coming out and grafting my seedling, bird-planted Bradford pears over into Asian and European pears. The European pears are Perry pears for alcohol, but the Asian pears are for high-end markets. But of course, they drop fruit. But the thing about this is where this becomes a hybrid, is there's this concept of pollarding, which is also when you lop off the top of a tree, essentially, And what it does is it causes the tree to sprout either all over the trunk or all over the trunk and from the top. And so you get these, a lot of times you see it with power lines. You see this really vigorous growth coming out of the top of where you just lopped a tree. And so when you're top working and paying attention to your silvopasture area or your pastured areas, you're going to get, so this person right here is top working Asian pear onto the top of this Bradford pear. But what happened months, not even a month later, was this Bradford pear sprouted out foot-long, luscious stems of pear leaves, which were really easy to harvest. I could just move my hand down the trunk, snap those off, and the pigs went crazy for them. And so this is a little bit of a, I would say you can employ this as a transitional method of getting both leaf hay and working towards getting like a fruit fodder crop in the future. And there are, with the bur oak, so in the white oak family, there's bur oak that produces a really big acorn, and within that family, there are a lot of low tannin cultivars, and so you could do that too. And low tannins are better for the pigs in the long run. They're more easily digestible, and so you know, you could plan for these hog trees. And way back when, there was a tree that was identified by John Hershey, and he called it Juicy Hog Biscuit, and it was a bur oak that the pigs just went crazy for and gained weight quickly on. All right, next slide. Okay, so now to transition from tree fodder to tree hay. These are pictures from my mentor, Shauna Hansen, who's in Belfast, Maine, and she runs a small goat dairy, which in the winter, which is often heavily fed using trees. She's really brilliant, and I recommend if you can ever attend an event that Shauna is where she is, I would go because she's amazing. But these pictures are from her, and the first is showing her pigs eating willow hay in the wintertime that she had saved, and then fresh Lombardy poplar in the middle there, and then ensiled elm. So that's, think silage. She made elm leaf silage. Okay, and I'll talk about all three of these in just a moment. Okay, go ahead. All right, but first I want to just show you the different methods, and this is a quick rundown of what's going on. But on the one on the left, that's coppice linden. Linden is one of the trees in Europe, and really the rest of the world, it's called a lime tree if you want to research it. It's a really early leaf. It pollards and coppices well. It's nutritious for the animals. And so here on the left is a picture of a coppiced stand of linden, which actually is probably just one tree, where root suckers came up and then they started coppicing those back down to the ground. But anyway, this was used, the coppicing method was used both for like building poles and for houses and whatnot, and firewood, but mostly at least what I'm paying attention to is tree fodder or leaf fodder. So in harvesting these leaves that were coming off of these little stems. And then over to the right is a pollarded linden. And this is the shred method. So these trees were cut off quite high, and then with a ladder they go down them and are harvesting with a bill hook essentially all the new growth leaves for tree hay. All right, go ahead. And then this is Shauna's version of doing a shred method with Lombardy poplar. And so her pigs they love it. But Lombardy poplar is interesting because it's a columnar tree, meaning that it pretty much it doesn't need a whole lot of space. It's a good barrier between neighbors. And you can basically, it's nothing but branches, nothing but short branches. So she just climbed up on a ladder, started cutting them down, and her pigs really love them. So this would be a good way of incorporating, say, like a hedgerow or a windbreak into some sort of fodder system. All right. And just to mention the ensiled leaf hay methodology that Shauna's been doing and that I'm ever interested in doing is basically this is small scale, and there are possibilities for doing this larger scale. However, this is a really this is not in cutting edge conventional agriculture, so you're not going to see any research money going towards this and how to make it bigger. But you basically take your leaves that you harvest any time of the year, and you put them into this bag. Shauna says that they have enough liquid in them, even in like a harvest in May. The leaves have enough moisture in order to ferment nicely. And so then you just take the air out of this bag. You can do you can use a shop vac on reverse to suck the air out, or you can just start pressing and twisting and getting the air out that way. You tie it off, you invert it, so turn it upside down, stick it in another bag, and this is a 4 mil, like heavy, contractor bag kind of thing, and then put it and do the same thing with the other bag, and then just leave it to store in a cool place. So the hotter the place, the faster the ferment, the more quickly the nutrients are volatilized, essentially, by the nice little bacteria. So you want to treat it like you would, say, sauerkraut. All right. Oop, that was a blank slide. Sorry. All right, and I think finally, hold on one sec. This is what I'm most excited about these days is working with mulberry. So mulberry is the highest protein, the highest digestibility, and the most minerality of any leaf hay, any tree there is. And the reason why I say that is because I went to a European convergence on pollarding this past year, or earlier this year, where there's brand new research showing nutrient analyses of these trees, and mulberry is amazing. And so it's also really conducive to both coppicing and pollarding. The picture on the left is a mechanization of a coppice. The trees are 3 feet apart, and the rows are, I think, 10 feet apart, 9 or 10 feet apart. And they have basically that machine is sort of a vertical hammer mill that then is grinding and chipping all the new growth. And this is for the silkworm industry, but it's silkworms eat mulberry leaves. So this would be the same situation if you wanted to feed any sort of livestock, cattle. Yeah, basically all livestock love mulberry. And the one on the right is another example. This is probably like 6 feet spacing within the row, and then 15 feet between the rows. And you can see this is a completely closed canopy, but these mulberry sticks here are getting harvested every 2 years. And so you could play, knowing that this is what a 2-year-old mulberry, or not a 2-year-old, these are probably like 20-year-old mulberries, but seeing a 2-year cycle of harvesting, you can harvest multiple times within a year, but seeing 2 and how it's such a closed canopy, this wouldn't be a bad thing for your dead of summer, and then you can cut fodder for them as well, just as some shade. You just might want to plan some more sunlight inside of there, dappled sunlight perhaps, to get some pasture growing. But it's all about manipulation, really, in what you're choosing to do. And, by the way, mulberry, so pollarding, I can't speak much to coppicing, but I can say that pollarding is, you might look at these trees and you might think, oh, this is so cruel. But actually, this is the way to make a tree live forever. So there are 1,400-year-old pollarded mulberry trees, and it turns out that if you don't pollard a tree, they reach maturity way faster. Whereas annual pruning or pruning every 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or whatever you're pruning for, is a lifetime sort of renewal process. So you're sort of keeping it juvenile for a very long time. And one more thing about mulberry is you can plan this. What you see here is for leaves, but you can plan this time scale for fruit and leaves too. Fruit, some cultivars of mulberry are on first-year wood, others are on second-year wood. So you can plan your cutting scheme for fruit and leaves depending on, you know, what you're going for. All right.
Great. So I guess we're getting close to the end of our webinar here, and we just wanted to throw out a few more additional resources. I always want to encourage people to talk to the older people in your area, the folks who have raised hogs, even if they haven't done, you know, really cutting edge agroforestry or silvopasture pig raising. There's still a wealth of information about everything else. And then I think there's a lot of really great resources out there on social media. So there's a ton of great pastured pig, tree hay, and agroforestry Facebook forums. So each time you visit one of those, just make sure, and you have a question, just use the search function within the group, because a lot of times those questions have been answered before. And then you could follow different hashtags on Instagram. All the pig farmers that I've met through Instagram have been really generous with their time and answering questions. And Eliza, do you want to talk about Fruit Explorers?
Yeah, and so it's really important to me in order to start to learn about the fruit layers that I was telling you about and the nut layers. Two of the most amazing resources out there are the North American Fruit Explorers, or NAFEX, and the Northern Nut Growers Association, or NNGA. And they're both on Facebook, but the real meat of these groups is in the old information and in meeting all the old members and who aren't on Facebook. And so in joining these groups and being cued into who's in your neighborhood, who's in your region, who's got, because a lot of these people are saving old collections. And so, for example, like I live very close to I live really close to where J. Russell Smith grew up, only a couple miles. And so in finding both, for me, I was able to get in touch with like Sandy at Northern Nut Growers Association, who gave me an import sheet of all the chestnuts that were imported into my area by J. Russell Smith, so I was able to identify the names of the Japanese and the Chinese chestnuts that are growing in my area. So it's just like an amazing connection to past history, but it's with fruit. So I highly, highly recommend joining both of those groups.
And if you're more of an audio learner, there's some great podcasts out there. You can just search for Pastured Pigs or Silvopasture in the podcast, but I particularly like Grass-Fed Life, which used to be Permaculture Voices. And then the Sugar Mountain Farm blog, it's over 2,000 articles, blog posts written by Walt on pretty much every aspect of pig farming. So you could get lost for days on that blog, and I recommend you do. So I think we've got time for questions. Oh, I wanted to give this webinar a shout out. Tomorrow, the Food Animal Concerns Trust, they are hosting a free webinar with Weston Lombard of Solid Ground Farm. So that's 2 to 3 p.m. Central Time. So that's tomorrow, and he has a lot of interesting experience to share with us about that, and I'm really excited for that. And now, questions. I can't see the questions since I'm still in presenter mode, so Eliza, you might have to read them. All
right.
Go ahead and pick out whichever ones you want.
I'll see. I'm going to start from the top. Let's see here. All right. So Kathy Zeman asked a whole flurry of questions. One being how much feed cost is reduced when your pigs are in a silvopasture system. And Dayna, maybe you can speak to this more so.
For sure. Yeah, I have found that sometimes it just isn't necessarily, sometimes it's not reducing the feed costs at all. I'll get to the end of the week and calculate up how much the pigs have eaten, and they've eaten the exact same amount, but then everything on top of that, so they're growing faster. So it's not necessarily reducing on a day-to-day basis, but you are getting more gains out of that. But I think I've seen figures, at least for the pasture level layer, that you can reduce your feed by 10% up to 50% just from your pasture, so that when you incorporate tree crops beyond that, it can be a pretty impressive reduction in feed costs. Thus far, it's still taking us between 700 and 1,000 pounds of feed per pig to get them to the weight that we'd like. And so since our feed is so expensive, anywhere between 35 to 45 cents a pound, that's something that we're really looking forward to reducing.
And I believe I've seen universities quote that savings can be upwards in like a sow operation, upwards of 30% if allowed on pasture. And that's like more of a conventional look, like, oh, let's give them some pasture, and then their feed savings are 30%.
Yep. And I also just think of it as it's also for their mental health too. I mean, the variety of feed and the joy of them looking forward to their next piggy feast. I think that's part of the benefit of the wide variety of tree fodder too. It doesn't, in my opinion, it's not all just about reducing feed costs. It's about giving them a wide variety of things to chomp on. Like the black walnuts have a lot of medicinal properties, so I'm trusting that the pigs can also self-medicate on various tree crops if they need to. So it's all about just increasing the options for them and the diversity in their diet.
And then there's another question about, did the water get hot in those tanks, in those water tanks? Go ahead.
Not terribly, but certainly on hot days it came out as pretty warm. But since when they're full, they maintain their temperature pretty well from the evening. But yeah, pigs definitely, the hotter the water is, the less excited they are about it. But it's never gotten to the place where it's been they've refused to drink it.
Yeah. And then her question, who's doing farrow to finish, like on pastured pigs? You need to go just check out Pastured Pigs on Facebook. There's Walter Jeffries, there's Carl Blake, there's David Crafton. There's all sorts of people out there who are doing it and who are doing it really amazingly well. Neither Dayna nor I are a farrow to finish because we like seasons. And
yep, not sure I'll ever be farrow to finish.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's a whole nother conversation.
You already answered that. All right, so let's keep, are you moving from, so this is for me. Are you moving from one end to the other within a month? And the answer is yes. That's my goal. And then I see there's another question wanting to know if they're just grazing each pasture of grass once in a season. And for now, the answer is yes, working at least for the pig layer for me. The future co-grazing is going to be by somebody else's enterprise. That is, I don't have time for anything else at the moment, and so it's got to be in bringing other people in or just mowing at this point. Please tell us you found juicy hog biscuit. I have not. We're looking for it at the moment. And nutrient analysis on leaf silage. Like I said, this is the most it is an ancient form of preserving leaf hay is an ancient practice, and it is not in contemporary agriculture in the United States. And so getting in any sort of nutrient analysis on a leaf silage has got to be citizen science and funded by whoever is doing it. So maybe in the future I'll be doing it, or I can help Shauna to get a grant to do her nutrient analyses. But it varies widely on the time of year you take it, the amount of moisture content that, whether you are in a drought or whatever. All right, and that's kind of it, I think. Anything else? Anybody want to chime in on your voice? Because I think you have the opportunity now.
Here we go. Matt. Matt, I unmuted you.
Oh, Matt got shy.
Don't be shy, Matt.
Matt? You can come back. I'm going to go to the next person, Matt. Oh, his mic isn't working.
Aw.
Kathy, go ahead. Kathy?
Oh, good. Did you ever count up your labor hours in knocking down the weeds, the brush, putting in your fences for a season?
Hi, Kathy.
Hey,
Hi,
so
Dayna.
I'll start on this first,
Kathy's my
if
friend.
you don't mind.
Go for it.
Okay, so for me, it's paddock by paddock, and so the fencing is never permanent. So it generally I lay out a week's worth of fencing on like a Sunday or something, and that might take me 2 hours to do, and then within that, and then so every day or every other day's removal is just moving a panel of electric fence within that long paddock of fencing. And so for me, it probably equals to be maybe 4 hours a week of moving animals with fencing. And that was for, yeah, that's probably for 10 pigs. That could be upwards of more.
Mine has ended up being, if I'm moving them, each day that I move them, it's about half a day of work. That's setting up all the fencing, moving all their equipment, and so that can be anywhere from every other day to every fourth day. So it does end up being quite a bit, but as Eliza said, on the days that you're just moving in between paddocks, if I've already set up 3 paddocks worth, it's just a 5-minute open a fence and close a fence.
Thanks, Kathy. And let's see here. There is another question on the chat function.
Yeah. Did you ever work out the idea of using an olive catcher? So this is because he's seen my Facebook activity. And so let me talk about Food Safety Modernization Act for a minute that I didn't talk about in the when I was talking about orchards and animals, is that it's undetermined at this point, but there's a chance that even in conventional orchards, this is not adhering to organic standards, that you will need 90 days between harvest of your fruit and animal and raw manure being in your orchard. And so that, for some people, that's really difficult when you're trying to use pigs in a practical manner, either to clean up disease beforehand or whatever. And so one of the ways around it is to catch the apples before they hit the ground. And in Spain, there's an olive harvester that looks like basically an upside-down umbrella, where you shake the tree. You can personally shake the tree, and the fruit falls into this umbrella and then gets funneled into little bushel baskets, which are also off the ground. And so all this is compliant with Food Safety Modernization Act. Basically, if you have a picker, somebody going up a ladder into a tree to pick fruit that's had animals in it in less than 90 days, that's not allowed, because they're saying the poo on the shoes hits the ladder rungs, which then hits the hands that are picking the apples or whatever fruit you're picking, and so it's a no-go. But so I very much so plan to use this, and it's an 18-foot diameter, and so I do not plant any trees that are closer than 9 feet apart for that reason. The 9-foot radius is my absolute minimum spacing, just so in the future I can use this upside-down umbrella from Spain to harvest fruit. within accordance with Food Safety Modernization Act, no matter if they like it or not. All right.
And did you answer about the spreadsheet? Is it?
Oh, yeah. Spreadsheet of the calendar and varieties proprietary. At this moment, yes, because it's my life's work. I have a nursery business that's sort of getting kicked off the ground in terms of Silvopasture and providing genetics with the time schemes associated to them, attached to them. And so right now they are proprietary. I'm sort of giving myself a 10-year time frame to not make them proprietary, but the nursery business is also my annual income. And so when you're growing perennials, you got to get crafty, and so that's part of it as well.
Great, thank you. Looks like Patrick has a question. Do you have mulberry cultivar recommendations for human consumption? I have some of your hog trees, but I'm curious of others.
Yeah, there's like Illinois everbearing it tastes really great. Acai tastes great. It depends where you live. If you can move towards Morris nigra, then that's a warmer climate species. Then you get to open up a whole other like flavor calculator, essentially. So, oh, you're in Georgia, yeah. So you should look into cultivars that are Morris nigra, because there are some amazing, amazing mulberries there. And any worry about spreading white mulberry is pretty much everywhere anyway. I view that's an interesting question, because I have no fears whatsoever of white mulberry spreading. I live in a former silk region where white mulberry has hybridized with red mulberry, and there's just no telling the difference of the two. And there's many, many, many cities along the East Coast that are the same. And I think that there's a war against white mulberry that's sort of unwarranted. Like the Nature Conservancy even went as far as saying you can't eat white mulberry, and that's such bullshit. You can totally eat white mulberry. Yeah, it's hardy. It's a great leaf fodder. If you just start cutting it down, it's going to come back. But it's the protein content is between 15 and 28%. So it's definitely something you can work to your advantage rather than worrying about its spread. Yeah, just a little factoid. Mulberry has the equivalent protein to alfalfa. And it has a higher minerality and a higher digestibility. So just in thinking about that in the future, like just in thinking about tree crops in the future, and providing some shade, providing some diversity, it's drought tolerant, essentially, when your grass hay is dyed because you have no water. That's really where these tree crops for leaf fodder shine. And mulberry's one of them. It's really amazing. Dude, they are such. I'm not a fan of silver bullets, but this comes damn close.
Thank you so much. This really went great tonight. So thank you again to everybody for joining us. And I hope you guys all have a great night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. How do pigs write top secret messages? With invisible oink.
Oh, good one.
What do you get when you play tug of war with a pig?
What?
Pork.
Wait, are you already an auntie?
No, I am not. I would love to be, though.
These all sound like such auntie jokes, like crazy Auntie Eliza and her pig jokes.
No, I actually quickly found Pig Jokes website.
Oh, okay. I thought you had to memorize. Okay, now
I do
you
like
have to...
this one. What do you get when you cross a frog and a pig? a lifetime
What?
ban from the Muppet Show studio.
Whoa.
That one's a little dark.
Weird.
What do you call a pig with no legs? Groundhog.
I love these. I love these so much. They're so clean and innocent.
I know. Who's the smartest pig in the world? Swine.
So bad. We should have tried to see how many pig puns we could have fit into here. I think I only have a couple.
Totally.
Hey, you guys. I was reading a book on pig anatomy the other day, and it was all pretty standard until I got to the end. Then there was a twist in the tail.
Oh. What do you take a sick pig? How do you take a sick pig to the hospital? In a ambulance.
What do you call somebody who steals pigs?
No idea.
A hamburglar. Oh God, this one's so bad. What's a pig's favorite color?
What?
Mahogany.
No. And then I got a ding. Somebody just left.
Like, enough of this crap.
Right.
Hey, why shouldn't you tell a secret to a pig? It might squeal.
What do you call a pig with a rash? Ham and eczema.
Ham and eczema?
I don't know.
I don't get it.
I don't either. Oh, ham and eggs? Like ham and eczema?
Oh, gross. We must be on the same website here.
Yeah, I can't imagine there being that many.
What do you call a pig who does karate? A pork chop. Some of these are pretty cute. Hey, Eliza.
Yeah.
What do you get if you cross a pig with a dinosaur?
I don't know, Dayna. What?
Jurassic pork.
All right, I'm going to switch it over to lecture mode here real quick. And make sure I unmuted you guys. Eliza and Dayna. I heard a pig. Am I crazy? Did I just hear a pig?
Okay, who's sitting with their pigs and watching this webinar? Hey, Eliza. What do you get if you cross a pig and a frog? A amphibian.
Hi, Matt. Patrick, I don't know if you guys can see the chat, but Patrick writes, he's bored out of his brains.
Good one.
B-O-A-R. That's a good one.
Hey, you guys,
hey,
what's
Dayna.
the difference? Hey, what?
What's a pig's favorite kind of meal?
Ooh,
a picnic.
What? Hey, Eliza.
Hey, Dayna.
What's the difference between swine flu and bird flu?
I don't know. What?
For swine flu, you need ointment, and for bird flu, you need tweetment. What's a pig's favorite ballet, Eliza?
What?
Swine Lake.
No.
These are so bad. They're
Hey,
so bad, they're good.
What's a pig's favorite magazine? Sports
what?
Illustrated.
You've got to have some good Apple jokes, don't you?
Not really.
No? Okay.
I've never really devoted myself to that, but I'm going to start now.
Hey, Eliza.
Hey, Dayna.
What do you get if you cross an apple with a shellfish?
I don't know what.
A crab apple.
No. Ew.
How'd the pig get up in the tree?
How?
The swine flu.
That's going to be the answer to my logo.
I bet, oh man, there've got to be some creative people on this call who could help us come up with some Silvopasture jokes, because I'm pretty sure if I Google Silvopasture jokes, there aren't going to be any.
Right. So throughout this call, if you have any Silvopasture jokes, please just type them in the chat window.
And we will cover them at the end.
Patrick would like for you guys to tell him how to add to their piggy bank.
Ah, we're going to work on that, I think.
Yep.
Good. Well, maybe while we wait just a couple minutes for a couple more people to join us, I'll get started on just a quick introduction to us and to the nutshell.